Today on the Vinyl Guide, we're very excited. We have Billy Howerdel, founder and visionary for A Perfect Circle, whose new LP, Eat the Elephant, is out today. It's quite a big week for you this week, isn't it, Billy?
Yeah, it's a lot going on. Taking it all in.
So the last time we saw an APC release, George W. Bush was president, and in the music there was a clear narrative for disapproval. You obviously skipped the Obama years, and now you're back with a Republican president. Is this a pattern? Does it take you and Maynard to get upset in order to write some new songs?
I don't know. No, I don't. I think we might be in coincidental territory, but it could be. I guess as artists, I mean, all the artists I know always get charged from something, and who knows? Could be something. Could be something to it. I'm going to non-answer that.
Yeah. Okay, we'll chalk that up to coincidence. The title "Eat the Elephant," I'm assuming that has some sort of political overtone as well.
I don't know. I think there's the old cliche that you could kind of go dig into. I'd say that's probably where it starts, but there's always kind of a duality to things, and a lot of times that's in the perception of the listener or the person consuming it. So, I mean, wherever it takes you, that's where it takes you.
And I noticed on the cover of Eat the Elephant, you guys are eating octopuses. What is the thinking behind that?
Again, I mean, I think there's, if I tell you, I think it's quite boring. I think, and I don't even know if I could tell you. There's, things kind of build upon themselves, and ideas get hatched from one person and passed to the next and interpreted, and before you know it, there's a final product, and in the interim, there's many things that can be interpreted along the way. I just don't like to spell it all out, and I don't love it when artists I know spell it all out either. So
yeah, you don't want to be too heavy-handed with it. So let's go back a ways. You've got a very distinctive style of guitar playing. Who were the influencers of you for your guitar playing?
It's funny. That brings me to this past week. I just got to I played a benefit in L.A. Some friends of mine had asked me to play on this Adam Ant record, or a cover of Kings of the Wild Frontier, which I've made it very vocal. That's my favorite record of all time. It's certainly the record that's standing the test of time for me for being influential. And I got the honor of playing with Marco Perrone, the guitar player and writer of that record. They flew him in to play on the last song, and I played with him and also Billy Duffy from the Cult. And right there are two guitars that I probably don't name enough. So I want to give them a little extra special time there. That was just an honor playing with those guys. But Randy Rhoads was a big one. I mean, as far as like Randy Rhoads played on the first two Ozzy Osbourne records. Those records in particular were, once I picked up a guitar, they were just fun to play. It was a challenge. But my musical background before that, and really even through that time, was mostly Britpop kind of stuff. So, Johnny Marr, Robert Smith, Will Sargent from Echo and the Bunnymen, and Joe Walsh from the Eagles is also a big one. So, I mean, I'm just a kind of a melting pot of all those guys and more that I'm forgetting.
Yeah, and I think one thing that a lot of those guys you just named in common, they tend to enjoy having a more exploratory approach to their guitar playing. So that sounds like it was something that absolutely influenced you.
Yeah, and, I think there's guitar heroes on that list, if I could say. I don't know. That's not meant to be pejorative in any way. Just like guitar, I don't know. What's the word? Guitar god? I don't know.
Well, Randy Rhoads obviously is a high water mark when it comes to that. Yeah.
Exactly. And I didn't go that much deeper into that territory. I was just into more songcraft kind of approach. I mean, Elvis Costello was my be-all, end-all. When I was a kid, you were probably sick of seeing me wear an Elvis Costello shirt. But I didn't dive into the music to try and dissect it and figure it out. I just liked absorbing it. And I found that with Adam and the Ants too. I had to figure out how to play two of these songs. And there's something different about listening to music and guitar-driven things and then figuring it out. There's a bit, it's almost like you asking me about the artwork and about concepts and things. Sometimes it's nice to put it out of focus and just let it wash over you for whatever situation you're in, and then it becomes the soundtrack or the visual for your moment that day or your summer, And I always appreciated that within music, that it became personal. It became mine, when I would listen to these artists when I was a kid. So that's me getting heavy-handed in how to listen.
So it sounds like you had a very diverse record collection as a child. Was there one or two particular records that really stand out in your mind in terms of those are the ones that influenced you, the ones that really kind of made you you?
Yeah, I mean, Kings of the Wall Frontier, really, that record then in 1980, I mean, I got it when I was 10 years old, so that'll date me, and I got a boombox for Christmas, and that tape was like hits of the 80s or something like that, and, Amp Music was on there, and quickly led me to buying that on vinyl, buying Kings of the Wall Frontier. It just is so odd and strange. There's, Native American influence to pirate music to punk rock, early pre-punk rock and post-punk kind of flavors in it. So that's one. God, I don't know if I had to sum up in another one. I would think Pornography from The Cure possibly would be in there, but I don't know. I could go back and forth on number 2 record in so many different directions. There's just so many that it's hard to choose.
Now, you started your career as a guitar tech, so I suppose you had some engineering background, some interest not just in the music, but the actual function of making music?
Yeah, for sure, but I didn't have a lot of access when I started. I grew up in New Jersey and not far outside of New York City, but it was worlds away as far as, having access, getting there. So, we lived with the looming towers 40 minutes in the distance, but I didn't have anyone that I knew that was really a musician, especially when I started, except for my friend Rob Coppell. He's the one that he was a guitar player. I would go to his house just to listen to him play, and eventually got sick of just watching and wanted to pick one up. So it just started there. I was kind of a late bloomer at like 16. So I was always searching for someone else around the area that knew what they were doing, and there was really no recording studios or producers or engineers of sorts. So I kind of just read magazines. I learned music by listening, figuring things out, and then reading, Guitar for the Practicing Musician and Guitar World and things like that, and trying to kind of piece it all together. And I rented a 4-track from a music store that was a ways away, and a drum machine, and rented a bass, and would write songs with a limited time. I'd rent it for like 2 or 3 days at a pop, like once a month, and then try and throw down ideas. And so kind of learned trial by fire in a very, isolated kind of situation. And then got into the teching world around more professional musicians, and then you kind of, by osmosis, kind of absorb these things of how to make music. And it really wasn't until I got off the road and got into the studio with Guns N' Roses in like the late 90s that I, was there every day, and the purpose in the studio was to make a record around very talented people, and then learned how to do it myself. And that's kind of what led me to be able to doing my own, doing everything on the first Perfect Circle record for the most part.
How do you get into the guitar tech world? For instance, what are the top 2 or 3 skill sets you need to be a good guitar tech?
I still get asked this. I mean, I've had people reach out to me online and say, how do you break into it? And, a lot of it is luck. It's like anything else. It's a word of mouth job. You do good and people want to hire you or recommend you. And obviously you'll never get called again if you fuck up. I think being a stagehand at a local venue is probably the fastest way to at least get your feet wet in the world. And then that's how I went forward. Is I was a stagehand at the Stone Pony in Asbury Park when I was a kid. I was like 18, and started working for local bands, and then guys you work with move up into nationally touring bands and kind of bring you along. That's exactly what happened to me.
So you started swimming in the circles of Nine Inch Nails, Tool, Smashing Pumpkins. At one point, you started playing some of your demos for Maynard, and he made it clear that he was interested in singing on the record. What was your reaction in the moment?
The first time he said it, and I do remember. I mean, he just said, What I remember him saying was, he just came in my bedroom because our room was an old 20s house, very thin walls, and I mean, so you could hear it through the walls. But it was, he heard something I was working on and just said, "Oh, it's cool. I could hear myself singing on that," and I just took it as, "Oh, you look good in that suit," like it was just a passing compliment. Mm-hmm. And then he kind of reiterated it again and said, "Look, I've got some time. I could, if you want, give a crack at singing some of this stuff." It was something along those lines, and so I kind of took it more serious, and I was like, okay, it was. I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, Maynard was in Tool, and it wasn't. I didn't quite know what to make of it, but we just said, okay, we'll just go from there. Start making some songs.
Yeah, there's a difference between "you look good in that suit" and "hey, let's get married."
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know how to read it at the time.
So you mentioned the songs were originally written with a female vocalist in mind. Did you ever do demos with a different vocalist?
Yeah. I mean, a little bit. My girlfriend at the time, I had tried to have her sing on some stuff, and didn't really get that far. I guess I was just trying to find that right person. There was a band I almost joined with Paz, and her name was Paz is our first bass player, right? Mm-hmm. And this girl Jackie Nimitz, they had played together, and she had her own band, but she had her own songs, and she wasn't looking for someone else's songs. And yeah, I didn't find that collaborator, that collaborator girl that I was looking for, I don't know. And when I say with a female vocals in mind, I don't know if I said those words or that was kind of just, I just was writing music and I wanted to find a female vocalist. Mm-hmm. There's things that I loved, but I heard something in my head that I didn't hear anywhere else, which was, I think Garbage got kind of close. I loved Bjork at the time, but it was really Elizabeth Fraser from Cocteau Twins that I just wanted to pluck out of the Cocteau Twins and put on top of the music I was writing. And, I was like, okay, where is the 20-something version of Elizabeth Fraser? And I just was on a mission.
So APC Mach 1, I guess, there was Paz, Lynn Fontaine. You mentioned Josh Freese, Troy Von Leeuwen. Was that band coming together when Maynard joined, or did it all start to come after he was attached to the project?
I would say Paz is the first one I saw and thought, I want to work with her. I saw her play at a little tiny place called CIA in North Hollywood. I don't even remember who she was playing with. She was, playing bass and guitar, or mostly bass, with a lot of people. And Adam Jones took me out one night to meet her. He was friends with her. So he just took me out to see whatever band she was playing with. And I just said, she just was so compelling on stage. And, so I always thought, like, God, if I do something, I'd really like to ask Paz to be a part of it. And we started talking about it. And I had, played her some stuff, too. And then went from there. Then when I got involved with Maynard, from there, it was Josh. Maynard mentioned Josh. He had toured with him with Devo. I guess Devo had done some touring with Tool in the past, and he had told me about this wise ass kid that was an amazing drummer. And then it came, kind of came about that was Josh. He goes, I told him I was working with this guy, Josh Freese, in the studio with GNR. He's like, oh my God, that's the same guy. So, and then Troy, we knew from Failure. Failure had opened up for Tool on a tour that I had teched for Tool for like a month, and that tour was Failure was on. So,
okay,
that's where we.
And now you got Greg Edwards in the touring band, so it's all, again, the community theory continues to prevail here. So
yeah, we are obsessed with nothing else.
So you had these songs written pretty well down the road in terms of the first Perfect Circle album. When Maynard came in, did he leverage existing lyrics? Did he write specifically to the songs? Like, how quickly did those pieces start to come together?
On the first record?
Yes.
Yeah, there was vocals I had, but they were more a lot of syllables, a lot of long, lofty things. things more in the vein of what I was looking for a girl to sing, in that, a song like The Hollow had, I can still hear the vocal in my head. It's just it's long, almost syllables stretched out to impossible lengths. And there were more atmospheres to kind of weave in within the music and be kind of more supportive than headlining. And so there was that. Maynard, I don't even know if he heard it. I might have played it because it wasn't even going to be influencing a real vocal anyway. But when I heard his vocal to The Hollow, I was blown away. It's not what I was expecting. And it was such an intricate, there's kind of like a weird guitar riff in there that's kind of hard to work around. So that was really cool. Things like 3 Libras, I had a melody, kind of Maynard would built upon that and then made it his own into the melody it is today. Judith was closer to the original of where I started. I had some temp lyrics in there, and they were very, I don't know. I could listen back to it and it's nostalgic, but it's, he kept some of the words and some of the chorus and things like I Did It All For You and things like that. But he just took a very somewhat interesting vocal and made it extremely special and unique and powerful. And so, to say that I helped influence that on that song, I think that's fair to say, but it's nothing like the original.
How prolific is he? Does Maynard have notebooks of ideas, kind of waiting for the right time to use them, or does he tend to tailor specifically for the piece, as much from scratch as possible?
I don't know. It's a good question. I've thought of asking it, and maybe I have in ways, but I don't know. There's some things that I find sacred in a way, or taboo to kind of even talk about. When he and I don't discuss method that much. We probably hear more of it when we're doing an interview. Like last night, we just did a live cast of Q&A with like 30 people, and it's funny because I learn more about him creatively in those moments than I do when we're working together. Because when we're working together, we're just really having a musical conversation. We're not really diving into, well, we should do this because of this, And I think it's another reason why I don't like discussing. I'm easier to discuss it with you than I am like with him, because I think you get into muscle memory and you get into patterns, and it's hard to break them. Or then like somebody said to me, or Greg. So Greg Egbert started playing with us, and he said, at first I was trying to figure out what you were doing, but now I realize that what you do is this. As like almost dissecting what I do, and it's like, okay, I don't want to know any. I don't want to know any of that because I get fearful that I guess I get superstitious that it'll go away or something, But that's maybe okay. It'll move on to the next phase, Well,
I guess there's got to be a working together so closely with someone. There's a vulnerability, and you also have to have your own space and your own secrets, and maybe even your own alchemy, which you bring to the table to make that partnership successful.
Yeah, I think so.
Are you and Maynard able to, I don't want to say veto, but be very direct with comments for one another? If he doesn't like something, he's able to share that, and you'll perhaps approach a guitar part differently. Same with him and vocals. Do you have that sort of relationship?
Yes and no. I think you pick your battles. I think it's, I'm married, so I understand how that compromise works, and it's similar with, So I guess if you are, you can understand what that means. It's like, especially when passion is attached. It depends how much do you want to get out of the passionate move forward. If Maynard's really sure about something that I'm doing that's rubbing him the wrong way, I'm going to listen and and reapproach. I think that there's a way forward regardless. It's the only hard part is when you really feel precious about a song and you're excited about it, and then the wind gets taken out of your sails, and that's just hard to deal with. I tend to not finish songs out as much anymore because of that reason. I mean, flashing back to Maynard James, you're asking about those first songs. I did have them more worked out. I had them more flushed out, and Maynard sang to them, which was great. Come 13th Step, there was things that he wanted to, get in and tinker with, and then I, found myself getting precious about the way things weave together because I thought that was the best representation, and he wanted to hear it a different way. So it was harder to compromise on. This time I kind of went the opposite way and was more open to even he lightly saying something. I tend to not push too hard for it. I mean, in the one exception might be Talk Talk. I felt a song that was really strong and really close to being done, and he liked the song, wanted to keep moving forward with it, but wanted to hear it in a different approach. And that song kind of drove me crazy because of that. But then again, I didn't take it as he didn't find it to be a good song. He wasn't finding his way through it. So, more and more on this record, I tried to find myself writing in service to getting the best performance out of Maynard. And, I just had first soundtrack like a year or two before, and when you're working on a soundtrack, it is all about the movie, and it's about how you're supporting emotionally the dialogue or the lack of dialogue that's in the scene. And I was just trying to go from that approach with this record to, get the best out of him I could.
So let's explore that a little bit. When you're creating a piece of music in your own studio, how do you know that this piece is suitable for a perfect circle, for Ashes Divide, for a soundtrack? How do you make that decision?
I at this point give him a bunch of songs and see where he's holding, creatively, and try not to overwhelm him with too many, and then give him the next batch. There's songs that I had in folders. I mean, I had made little playlists and things on my own computer that I heard as the next Ashes record. I heard there's the new Perfect Circle record. And he picked some, and he surprised me with some that he picked. And I played some with like, hey, I just want to show you where I'm at with Ashes. I had some songs with vocals on them even. And he seemed to be into it, So I kind of removed it, gave it some time, didn't tell him what the song was, maybe reapproached the music a little bit, and then hand it to him. And, next thing you know, we're doing it as an APC song. So
you mentioned going into 13th Step, which it was a totally different situation than Maynard James. Those songs you've been working on for, 5, maybe even 10 years. You had the luxury of time to let them unravel, to let them evolve. And the LP was a huge success. Now with 13th Step, you were starting fresh again, lots of eyes on the band, lots of pressure. How did that dynamic change going into that record?
Well, it was similar in the way that I was still picking songs for Maynard James, similar to picking them for 13th Step. There were some songs that were older. I mean, the song Weak and Powerless was, one of the first sketches I had ever drawn out. I would think it fits comfortably with Brenya, with The Hollow. I'm talking about like early stuff, like in my parents' basement with a 4-track kind of stuff. And even up to this record, there's songs that have been around a long time, but I didn't finish them out. So it's been similar in all the records of that. I've always kind of drawn upon older material as the foundation, older ideas or ideas that have just been around, but doesn't mean I don't really keep working on them as time goes on. I usually get an idea that I think is interesting and kind of table it. And usually it just sits there with the idea that I'm going to try and write lyrics to it. And if I don't write lyrics to it, it's just going to sit there and wait until I present it to Maynard for APC. So I'm not constantly working on it, unless it is for Ashes. Like there's some songs that are going to be on this new Ashes record that I'm now like somewhat working on, but even then I don't know what it's going to sound like, because at the end of the day I'm going to bring someone else to help me make that record, and it could completely change. So I try not to, getting back to your original question, like getting back to 13th Step, it was similar. It was just that Maynard wanted it to have more investment in the music and the overall, and that's why, we put him down as executive producer, because at the end of the day, it really was trying to get, he's not being within the computer. He's not, he's not an engineering guy, but he is a music guy. So he can speak in broad strokes and 20,000-foot views of songs. And I think that's, a great strength he has.
It's one of his strengths, yeah, absolutely. But Mayor Denam's, from the outside, obviously, seemed like it was your vision, and he was going on that trip with you. 13th Step feels like a time where it became a partnership with two guys who are, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but, they like to control. And so how was that shift working together managed?
In the beginning, it was, trying to figure out how to manage it. Our good friend Danny Lohner was helping us out, and, Danny is another strong personality. So, and Josh Freese is a creative personality. It's, there was a lot of opinions in the room. So, I was always the one engineering and producing ultimately, and it was the files resided with me. I was the one sitting and kind of rough mixing things out with the idea of really wanting to get my best presentation forward without having to talk about it. I'm not very good at talking about, hey, let's try something that sounds like this. I'm better at taking the computer and showing you what I mean as a final product. So in that time, in 13th Step, I mean, if I can think back to something like the Noose. The Noose is an idea that Maynard came in with musically. Usually, I will come in with the musical idea, and he'll respond to the conversation. With that one, he just had a little simple approach for the verse, and and it was great just to come from someone else having a musical start. So that was a different approach, and I love the way that song came about. But I think Danny Lohner had a lot to do with how the arc of that song kind of took over. It might have been a much more linear track if I was the only one involved. So the spirit of collaboration is in play there strongly.
So after the 12 or 14-year break, why is now the right time for a Perfect Circle record?
I mean, I don't know. You'd have to ask Maynard a little bit. I mean, he had a lot of other things going on. I think he was really had a lot of energy and time that went into Puscifer. I know that he's been working with the Tool guys for a while, and that's been ongoing. So when he just said he had a break in his schedule, or what do you think about doing this? It was sometime in 2016. And it really was, we got a new manager, and it was the manager that he was working with Puscifer. He kind of orchestrated this and got it together and made it happen and got us both to the table. And, come January 2017, we said, we're going to start making a record. It's kind of as simple as that.
And now seems to be a time when there's a lot of reformations. Obviously, we see Tool in the studio now. Smashing Pumpkins are back, and a Perfect Circle. It seems like everything's hitting at this particular point in time. Any ideas why, or again, chalk it up to coincidence?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can see. You had asked about things in our macro world influence us. I mean, a lot of times the things that are in our micro world that do too, personal relationships and dynamics, but it's near impossible not to be charged with the world in 2017 and 18. I think that everyone has an anxiety in some kind of way, and if you don't, I think you've been blissfully living on a
you're not paying attention.
You've been in the cast of one and Castaway,
So, Maynard Denam's 13th Step are no longer available on vinyl, and copies of those go for quite a tidy sum these days. Any thoughts about doing reissues of those albums?
Yeah. We just we did a remaster of Maynard James last year, or a year and a half ago, actually, and I'm glad you reminded me of that. I think I got to check on what's going on with that. Yeah, I gone in and had the whole first record remastered. So, yeah, soon.
Okay.
Yeah, it needs to be back on vinyl. I'm a vinyl fan, and I appreciate it, and I think people obviously still do too.
Yeah, is that your preferred method of listening to music?
I mean, when time allows, and when when I've got it set up. So obviously, it takes a little more effort. I mean, there's something to be said about rituals, and that's one that kind of forces you to slow down and listen. And on top of it sounding great, it's just it's in the same, for the same reason that I meditate is the same reason why I like to put myself in that place to listen to some vinyl.
Mm. Do you spend a lot of time listening to music?
No, I don't. Not that much. More than I have in the past few years. This year, I've started to more, and realize it's funny. It's like, why don't I listen to music more? My car. I've got an older car, so I don't have any way to listen to music unless I'm using earbuds. I've got to get that situation set up.
That's quite an old car, by the way. That's a.
Yeah. I don't even have a CD player in the car. It's bad. But yeah. So when I'm usually when I'm cooking is when I'm listening to music. I find myself listening to a lot of things I always have, but when I find a new record I like, I beat it to death. I'm kind of really late to the game in the Lana Del Rey train, but that Lust for Life record I really liked listening to, like on repeat, especially while cooking. There's a few records that kind of poke out here and there, but I'm a horrors fan. The Black Queen. There's some things that have got my attention that I listen to kind of repeatedly, but I'm not constantly searching for new music, which I feel like that's about to change.
So you don't search for new music. You tend to listen mainly to music from the past 20 years?
Or more. Yeah. Yeah, but there's so much. I mean, when I'm writing, sometimes I don't, if I'm writing music, like new music, I don't listen to a whole lot for some reason. And then once in a while, I'll throw a record on for inspiration. I would say that Kings of the Wild Frontier record is that, and Tinderbox by Susie and the Banshees are probably two go-tos for me for when I'm feeling a little flat. They definitely stir something up. Or Japanese Whispers by The Cure. They can kind of kick me into high gear a bit. But there's, I sit in silence a lot. I mean, it's funny to say, but especially while driving, I've kind of enjoyed just sitting and being with my thoughts.
Yeah, the sound of the road and just wishing you had a CD player. So, is it true the song "Vanishing" was intended to be on Maynard James, but didn't make it to the album because apparently you misfiled it on your home computer?
Yeah, I guess I have said that in an interview. Yeah, I think it was called Untitled, and I never looked at it. It was one of those weird things, and I'm pretty organized with the computer, or at least was. Yeah, probably would have been.
And this APC record took 12 years to make. Do you think the next one will take this long? Well,
I would hear or read that and think, wow, that's a long time to make a record. It didn't. I mean, there's been that much gap between the record, but the record took about 6 months to make. I would say in its entirety. From January 2017 to January 2018 is the span of the record, but we went on tour for 4 weeks in the spring, 6 weeks in the fall, plus pre-production rehearsals and a little break after each. That's that was the time of making this record. So I'd say certainly under a year, but it was this year that we made that record. The other times we're just sketching. We're looking back to sketches that were written, little things I'd written throughout the years. So, I mean, that could be as simple as when we hang up the phone that I come up with a riff or something that just sits in a folder for the next 3 years, and then 10 years from now it makes it onto a record because we decide to kind of flush that thing out. I don't look at it like taking 12 years to make it. I guess maybe I'm getting defensive in saying that, I've been around people that do labor for years and years on music, and I guess I look at it like I don't want to be paralyzed by too many choices and lose momentum of steam. I'd like to kind of get it done within a short window of time.
Sure. Let me rephrase the question. Is it going to be another 10 years before we get to hear another A Perfect Circle record?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
No, I'm very much in the courtroom state. Who knows? I don't know what the future holds. I don't know, and I'm sure Maynard doesn't know either what his long-term schedule is. I know that he's been trying hard to get the Tool record to be finished for a long time. I know I've got Ashes Divide on the horizon, or whatever I'm going to call it. I'm terrible with sales like that. So yeah, I think those things are in our immediate future is supporting Eat the Elephant, but after that, I think those things are on the horizon.
Well, Billy, whatever happens, we wish you the best of luck, and we will definitely be here. Hopefully it'll be sooner than the next 10 years, and I'm hoping you're not going to open your own winery. So thanks again for joining us here on the Vinyl Guide. We do appreciate it. I do want to call people's attention to the new LP from A Perfect Circle, Eat the Elephant. It's really quite remarkable. Again, it's another step in the evolution of this band. You could Google it. You could hear it. It's pretty much everywhere this week. Of course, you could always go to aperfectcircle.com to check it out yourself, order the vinyl copy, and check out the tour dates of Billy and Maynard and the whole cast and crew. All right. Thanks again, Billy, for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it was good.